So I have a friend who was telling me that she used to have the perfect cocktail party opener.
Ooh.
And she would just say, or networking event, right? She would say, "What do you know about Columbus?"
Hmm.
And it's like provocative and it's you immediately you've jumped into something, maybe like the middle of a conversation. There's
Yeah.
Columbus can mean obviously the dude or a city or
Yes.
something.
Ohio.
So it's like, okay, this is now we're in the middle of something. And as most of us know, Columbus was canceled
He's done.
quite thoroughly, sometimes violently. So she no longer has her cocktail party opener.
Oh man. I mean, listen, Columbus is still a monumental figure in travel, in crossing oceans. I mean, that way, pretty impressive. Yeah, I find myself referencing Columbus, I think pretty heavily in the last 10 years. I actually just did a pilot with my wife and I made a Columbus joke in it because I was talking about the spice trade driving international interconnectivity as much as just about any in history. And I said without it, Columbus would have probably just discovered pesto. He would not have, without the spice trade, with all this desire for things over there and roots to the east to get their silks and their spices. He would not have been as motivated. And actually, when my wife had her cookbook party, I made like a bunch of different placards with a bunch of food jokes on them. But one of the ads I did for her release was, oh, like buy this book and you'll make it deeper into India than Columbus ever did. So I can't even tell you how many different times I've used Columbus in improv performances because he's just such a great figure of like ego and desperation. And he was like hated then, and then he was valorized, and now he's hated again. And then, at least from his letters and the letters of his companions, you're like, whoa, what a different world. Now, it's not that different, but what a different world he lived in. And it seems odd from a modern vantage point to, well, this is the difficulty. It becomes difficult, I think, from a modern vantage point to valorize anyone from the past. Although, if we can continue that trajectory, that means anybody alive right now who we think is heroic, probably heading for the Columbus treatment somewhere in the next couple hundred years. So I think in some ways it's a great illustrative figure of how history is going to and has repeated itself. And we're in this midst of the same type of thing right now. It's
And we're coming up on the holiday previously known as Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day,
Yeah.
which leads to our question for today.
Hmm.
And are land acknowledgements helpful?
Mm. Okay. My immediate, this is, I'll tell you already, I've only had like 3 or 4 hours to prepare for this particular question, which puts me a little bit on edge. It makes me feel very alive, though. It's very electric. It's very improvisational. I'm going to say that if the question intends to say, are they of net benefit or are they net helpful? Then I would say no. I have a thumbs down. Are they helpful at all? Meaning, is there some benefit that it doesn't end up net? Then I would say yes. So it depends how absolute the question is. Are they helpful at all?
More
Yes.
helpful than not? Hmm.
Yeah. Are they more helpful than not? No. They are more harmful than helpful, but they are helpful, is my answer. Just to start with, before we've actually kind of engaged in curious co-exploration, myself, Brendan McNamara, and you.
Andy Swindler. And as you can tell, sometimes we can't help but actually explore, rearrange, and upgrade the question itself. So, because every episode we ask a binary question about an incredibly complex topic.
Yeah.
And so that allows us to do a kind of Siskel and Ebert type of voting. We vote at the beginning and we discuss. We often see things from very different perspectives. We do research in very different ways,
Yeah.
love each other deeply. We
Yes,
used to be
indeed.
college roommates, and actually once we sat in a theater with Siskel and Ebert. Well, you probably did multiple times, but there was one time I did. And I was
I
like, oh,
know.
wait, why are they sitting on opposite corners?
Yeah. Sorry to break it to anybody, folks. Not enormously close outside of work.
And then we vote again at the end. And
Yep.
hopefully we've completely answered every question and solved the topic. That's
Yeah.
rare. I will.
It's rare. Yes,
Yeah.
it's rare. Hopefully, if my hope is always, have we shown people a better way than whatever more toxic way than we do it, how to discuss things where they disagree.
Or even just to discuss things at all and not just post memes about them.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to somebody, people. All right. Can I look at your outline and jump into the next question? Because I think this is
Let's get into it.
we're already diving. It feels like stepping into it with your toes, but I actually think the answer to this question is going to send us in to our chests, even our necks.
Because first, I think we have to, and we have, touched on this on other episodes, but
Yeah.
especially related to Palestine and Israel
Yeah.
recently. But what does indigenous even mean?
Yeah, well, as near as I can tell, it's funny, I didn't look up the OED version, but I would say my consensus summary, paraphrastic, is indigenous means a people native to a land.
All right, all right. When I think about it, and again, we're illustrating. Brendan looked it up, and I thought about it. Uh, is that they were the first people to settle a
Mm,
particular area
mm.
as humans, as far as I understand, originated in Africa and sort of migrated out to all these different places.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So who got there? Who got to any land other than Africa first? Yeah, okay. So New Oxford American says the primary definition is originating or occurring naturally in a particular place, native. So native to this place. Originating. So originating speaks to firstness. And then another one says inhabiting or existing in the land from the earliest times or from before the arrival of colonists. But then that has to get us into another definition, which we'll probably get into at some point anyway. So yeah, originating or occurring naturally. Now, occurring naturally is difficult because what is an unnatural occurrence for human beings if every single move from a place to a place involves travel?
I mean, that takes us into like creationism or something.
Right,
They
right.
just popped out of the spring.
Right. Well, which either way, creationism or like an atheistic explanation, people still started somewhere. They originated somewhere.
Well, and the before colonists is intriguing because one of the challenges with all this stuff is that there has been so much inbreeding, uh,
Yes.
you know, tragically, largely due to rape and other things. But it's not as clear, like at a DNA level, sort of like who is
Yes.
part of which, clan and origination point.
Yes. And how annoying is this? Looking up colonist, an original settler or founder of a colony, inhabitant of a colony. Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Terrible definition that doesn't define the one word I'm asking about, which is a colony. Then what is a colony? A group of immigrants or descendants who settle in a distant territory but remain subject to or closely associated with the parent country, or a territory thus settled, or a region politically controlled by a distant country, a dependency. That's interesting. Or really, a colony is a territory subject to a form of foreign rule. I wonder why colony says far away. That doesn't need to take. That's not true. But that's not true in how we use it. Because the Irish are the indigenous of Ireland, the Scottish are the indigenous of Scotland, and yet they were colonies of England, which was not far away. It was very close. It was actually land connected. So I actually think that's interesting. That's not how we use the word. The far away part is not necessary at all, right? Because it's not necessary for colonization. The action or process of settling among or establishing control over the indigenous people of an area is colonization. So these all start to, this is where it already is tricky, Andy. These things already start to dispute themselves. Because colonization, meaning outside groups coming in, taking over other areas, displacing and often enslaving, harming, killing, raping, stealing women, etc., and then taking over that territory while their previous territory remains, has occurred in North America for hundreds, maybe thousands of years before Europeans arrived. So then to add the far away thing changes our use of the word entirely.
Yeah, and so one way I entered this when I was at sort of my peak woke was reading Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's Indigenous Peoples: History of the United States,
Yeah.
which, as you might imagine, is a heavy bias or lens, to telling that story from a well, and it's interesting actually in that book. Of course, they, broadly all
Yeah.
indigenous folks in Turtle Island, America, this land we are in currently, they can't all possibly agree on one thing because that's not how humans really work.
Yeah.
But she, in her research, had realized that they like the term American Indian. So that's the term she used. And
Oh,
I
interesting.
was
Yeah.
slightly
Yeah.
shocked by that because it was like, and this happens, right? It's like African American for
Yeah.
one generation, it's black for another generation, whatever. It's Native. We grew up and they were Native Americans, as I
Yeah.
recall.
That's what we had. Yep.
And then American Indian. So I feel like it's one of those take back because obviously the word Indian was sort of ridiculous because they were in the wrong place and they were like,
Well, it meant in India actually comes from Indus, which means children of God. Those who are in Deus or in Dios. So it actually means people like children of God. So it means in that case that would mean the American children of God.
oh, well, that makes a lot more sense. I thought it
Yeah,
was just like, oh,
yeah.
we
That's
thought
what
we
I
were one
thought too.
people.
That's what I grew up thinking too. That's why I used it in the exact ad that I talked about in that exact way. And it was only during I think while I was doing that I was exploring it. Then I was like, again, even with my jokes, I'm like, is this joke referencing accurate material? Which, again, that can be a bit much,
Teaching
but
people through your jokes.
you do listen. Hey, John Oliver tries to do it every week. Um,
Well, and even then, it's like I don't know is an Indian an English word? It's I'm kind of like, well, wait a minute, they weren't
yeah,
Indians.
yeah.
Like, well, Indians aren't Indians. They probably have their own word for their
Yeah, they had their own.
nation,
They had their own words before India was, but now they're proudly Indian. So yeah,
right?
no, people can change their designation quite often, and certainly seem to agree with it. Wait, based on that book, when you were first sort of introduced to this concept, how did she define indigenous, or did she?
I'd have to go back and look
Okay.
specifically, but no, I really believe it was the other term is like First Nations, like basically the people
Yes.
who were here first. One of the things I did learn though that really I think counteracts the way what I was taught, maybe we were taught, as proud Gen Xers folks.
Yeah.
Often the generation, if generations are listed in like a drop-down menu, we're skipped. I recently
Yep.
saw us lumped in with the boomers, which I reject with love.
No, gosh, no. We're actually, I think, technically we are in that Zennials
Well, that's
little
true. We're in like the
subcategory. The
that's
end of
true.
the end of the Xers, beginning of the millennials.
We have a foot in the millennials. That's true.
We do, we do.
Um, oh, I totally lost my train of thought. Where was
Hmm.
it? One of the things that she had pointed out is, I was taught growing up that the American Indians, I'll just probably go with that phrase for now, were largely migratory, so that
Yep.
there was a sense of like they didn't own land and they didn't think about land ownership in the same way. Now, in some ways, I think that's probably true in the sense that I do think they were far more connected to the land and honoring of it and maybe thought of it more spiritually throughout various cultures. Uh, but on the other hand, they had really sophisticated farms and agriculture
Yeah.
and politics. A lot of the
Yeah.
things we
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
about how to even start the United States were learned from American Indians. And so that was one of the biggest pieces I learned. And of course, I'm sure there were more migratory, tribes and clans and nations,
Yeah.
uh, but I think there. I think you've taught me to sort of pump the brakes on judging intention too clearly. But
Mm.
it is a lot of people would say that that was part of a general sense because if we successfully cast American Indians as like less than, like they're uh, maybe less than human. I don't think we ever went quite to the point of saying like the three-fifths, of a human, but certainly less advanced, uh,
Yeah.
more I don't know, help me out. What am I trying to say?
Yeah. Well, there we do have to wrestle with. Well, I think this is kind of what you're wrestling with. We do have to wrestle with the superiority claim, basically because of how most societies establish their superiority. This is even for people who believe in human beings evolving from other states. Then whoever was superior won, and then
And
the
the
other ones
superiority
died out.
justifies that is, yeah,
Yeah, and
the right.
superiority. So evolution, from an evolutionary perspective, that means the Europeans were superior to the native peoples because they won. So that literally proves the case. They were a more adaptable people to nature and other people, which of course all the communities who existed here prior to the Europeans had also engaged in. That tribes were destroyed. They fought over land. They fought over good agriculture land. They fought over hunting grounds. They fought over water sources. So they may not have owned it, but they owned it in the same way that gangsters own territory. You're like, oh, you're in blood territory. You're in Comanche territory right now. Why are you hunting on our lands? Would absolutely be part of it, would be an issue, you know? So then that's the fascinating thing. But hey, let's go back for a second to Indigenous Peoples Day. If Indigenous people are the people who are native to their land, then factually and absolutely, there is no people group that isn't indigenous somewhere. So literally, Indigenous Peoples Day, this is why the modern American mind is very, very confused about reality. They tend to paint that as like, oh, just the people who are your just people who were there first. But that was your people too. It's all people. No people are non-indigenous.
Right.
So indigenous people is everyone. So then there does have to be, in the context of land acknowledgements, there is a hierarchy of indigeneity where people in what is paid attention to. So then that is has to be confusing. To me, it's like the plus at the end of LGBTQ plus. Cool. Plus can include anyone. So then everyone is in that group.
Didn't
Unless
we
you,
just decide it was Q plus?
yeah, Q plus. There you go. That's literally so it's everybody. It's everyone. So likewise with Indigenous Peoples Day, and this is why people getting mad about it is silly because you're like it celebrates you, whoever you are. It celebrates you. So what are you so mad about? Like that would be crazy.
Well, I think it intersects with other topics we've covered, and even recently with the whole conversation about, progressives. And the word I was hunting for there was primitive. Like we've cast them as
Yeah, yeah,
primitives, and
yeah.
that makes it easier to, think of like, well, we came in and did
Fix
did all these
things.
wonderful things for them and showed them how to live, and then
Yeah,
killed them. Um, and this seem one of the variables there seems to be the perception of harm to
hmm,
to a specific group. So
yeah,
so yes, like we're all indigenous to somewhere. I think about that a lot as
yeah,
I think mostly having like British blood, Western European blood. Like, oh, I want to go learn about my ancestors. And
yeah,
then if
yeah,
you trace it back even further, like, when people talk about like, well, we all migrated from Africa, it's like, well, does that make me African American? Well,
yeah,
that wouldn't go over super well, but maybe it does.
yeah,
But that perception of the degree of harm and
yeah,
maybe the concentration of harm and because absolutely, I remember reading The Dawn of Everything. That was a lot of where I learned about what you're talking about, which are there were American Indian tribes here that had slaves,
yeah.
before
Oh,
the
for sure.
Europeans
Yeah,
even
yeah,
got
yeah.
here, right?
Yep.
So there is both a romanticizing that can occur. I know I've been guilty of that. Uh, but I wonder how much it's just connected to, I don't know, maybe guilt
Yeah.
or just the concentration of harm, right? The magnitude and concentration where it's like, oh, well, if tribes are kind of warring, that's one thing, but coming in and I don't know, wiping them out or putting them in camps or making them march from one place to the other is different.
I guess. Yeah, but it's just, I mean, a lot of it is simply technological. Just we always increase capacity for harm. That's what human beings do. So then the ways that people fought on the plains of Montana, whatever, 1,000 years ago, was much more harmful than how they had fought 500 years earlier, before they had, or 1,000 years earlier, before they had fully domesticated horses. So in some ways, that's just like a weird, like, sure, yes, but what you're speaking to is capacity for harm. But I think this is where we've talked about this before. This is progressivism kind of has to engage on that level because it's not a principle-based system. Not it's a moral relativist or utilitarian ethics system. So then it has to confront the great difficulty here with this whole even idea of conceiving people as colonial or colonists, colonial imposers or harmers of the native people, because that happened before, it happened again. I'm not saying I'm in favor of anyone having done it. However, what then? This is the oh, let me just do it now because maybe people. I want people to get this in case they give up too early on this episode. From a progressive point of view, the victory or supremacy claim of European settlers is a sort of past run simulation of modern progressive ideology. Let me explain myself. The settlers who came here were a minority group who suffered disproportionate losses, disproportionate harm sets in the land that they occupied. And we know it was disproportionate compared to other occupants of the same geographic area, which is how we progressives in the modern sense look and find who is marginalized, right? It's by outcome compared to a group that's faring better, right? You would agree to that? Okay. So likewise, settlers, then early settlers, early colonists, were the marginalized of that context. So what happened here is the marginalized eventually grew enough and gained enough power and traction that they could then challenge the hierarchy and in many ways simply reverse the marginalization hierarchy to where then they were no longer the marginalized and they became the oppressor by virtue of enacting their own methods. And they enacted their methods upon the same ethical paradigm that progressives designed their metrics on, which are utilitarian ethics, which means you can treat people unequally so long as your intention is net benefit, let's say, in the broad sense. Net benefit to whom? Well, most especially to those people who were previously marginalized. So that means it is very easy from a progressive point of view to completely justify the entire harm set. So then I find it very curious and even strange that progressives seem to be the ones obsessed with this particular harm set. My theory is the obsession is based on having to villainize that one so aggressively that they therefore put a distance between themselves and that one because the principles or the definitional principles as well as the ethical principles are the same. I don't think I've ever heard anyone present that argument, but I think it's extremely strong in terms of the definition. I think it could be refuted. I'm not saying it couldn't. And I have further proofs if you want to explore this further about like how this is that European dominance is actually a good thing across like 5 points of analysis from progressive worldview. But that to me is the weird
Well,
part of it, land acknowledgement, right? Because it seems obsessed. I would even say land acknowledgements are white supremacist, and that they seem to suggest that European dominance was somehow just like so alarmingly different. It was so much broader and harder and more effective essentially that it's like we have to consider it as completely different than all of the previous subjugation, destruction of people on these lands. And so we're only going to acknowledge some of those nations. And then some of the nations that people acknowledge are nations that conquered, displaced, enslaved other people groups while maintaining a separate sort of like whatever organizing body. Their tribe existed elsewhere and they went out and essentially colonized that area as well. And not even essentially, they literally did. So then that seems very strange if the whole attempt of it is to kind of like acknowledge the harm of colonialism. It's selective. Once again, this is a progressive problem. It's selective application of principle, which then again, most times throughout human history, we just call that hypocrisy. But again, I've been trying to explore continually of like, wait, Okay, but with from an internal utilitarian ethics perspective. And actually that's my question. Since you're somewhat within a moral relativist utilitarian ethics perspective system in Oak Park, Illinois, then how would they what possible problem could they have with the marginalized rising up and taking power?
right now. Or you mean, oh, you mean in the context of the colonizers?
Yeah, well, in the context of of the marginalized, the colonists were the marginalized people, factually, based on all the same metrics that we use to evaluate who's marginalized today. So then, why wouldn't that why wouldn't that be something that would be much more tenable as a something progressives would support contextually, like within the context?
I mean, the basic oversimplified narrative is, uh, hey, all these people were here doing their thing. Uh, the rosy version is, getting along and farming and stuff. The more accurate version is, yeah, they were doing that and all the other human stuff. Like,
Yep. Just as human as the rest of us.
yeah, we we got here and killed most of them, stole their land, and shoved them into reservations where they now have a life expectancy, I think, on average about ten years lower than the rest of America.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I don't think we killed, I don't, well, I wasn't here, but I don't think Europeans killed most of them. Disease actually killed most of them. And Europeans went ahead and killed hundreds of thousands, if not like low millions of them.
Did we bring those diseases?
Yeah, by virtue of existing.
Yeah. So,
So their immune systems were, but in that case, your immune system is simply incapable of existing in a heterogeneous society. And progressivism generally, like their whole desire, right, is to dismantle isolationist systems and create interconnected, interdependent economies, right? That's kind of their, in which case the Europeans did that, right? European forcibly integrated North America into a global network of trade, ideas, and technology, the Columbian Exchange. So this broke down feudal or tribal isolation and created the conditions for a more globally conscious humanity. So then, if we're allowed to rupture universal principle in order to create beneficial outcome, that is a specific progressive outcome that this created.
hmm. Well, let's go deeper into land acknowledgements since
Yeah.
that's the topic.
Yep.
Maybe even taking a baby step back and saying, well, what the hell is a land acknowledgement?
Yeah.
I encountered these. I don't know, well, it was probably before George Floyd, but somewhere in that sort of 2000-ish.
Yep.
No, that's not true. I'm sure I encountered them years before that, but I guess to me that was sort of the peak of a lot of progressive activity, or
Yeah. Yeah.
at least public facing or
Yeah.
broadcast.
Yeah.
Um, so as I understand it, a land acknowledgement and have experienced it, and in some cases have even like participated in this directly.
Yeah.
Uh, a land acknowledgement is when a group of folks, probably, and this hints at one of the challenges, probably usually uh, of a, let's say, European descent, aka those colonists, uh, now in the current time, like
Yeah.
early 21st century, start a meeting or
Hmm.
a conference or usually it's some kind of, often it's done in public, maybe somebody standing at a podium
Yeah.
before we gather. Let's just say before we gather, usually in a physical place, we'll say a few sentences. I'm sure I could find one quickly if we wanted to actually like hear an example. That might be interesting. But basically, the tone of it is basically like, we honor the uh, first people, the indigenous folks who once occupied this land,
Hmm.
something of that tone, and
Yeah.
then you'll list them. Um, Now, where I am in a park just outside of Chicago, it's rather confusing. Often, in a lot of
Oh,
cases,
yeah.
the research is a little clearer. I mean, to your point, it was like
Yeah.
it was kind of like one tribe or First Nation, you know, occupied or sort of guarded a space. And so it's funny, like in a lot of groups, where people, because the other thing is, in addition to like that land acknowledgement before a gathering, that's sort of like the person at the podium,
Yeah.
when people might check in, or even in their Zoom, they might put like next to their name, like what, or in the chat, like, oh, where are you from? It became
Mm.
quite common to say, well, I'm in Oak Park slash, and I might summarize to say the land of the Three Fires Council, because I don't even, this was a very busy place. We're right next to
Yeah.
Great Lakes, lots of
Oh yeah,
rivers,
yeah.
lots of fertile ground. I mean, this is a very busy spot.
Yeah.
So if you go to something, and I do like this tool, so native-land.ca,
Oh, cool.
where you can see this big map of research. And this I'm going to highlight. We'll often divide things into pros and cons, so we can start maybe like
Yeah, yeah.
picking those out. This is a pro, is like just history, cool.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
research history, like what happened here, who used to live here, all of that. Um, and it's funny, I hadn't looked at it in quite some time, years probably. And now, of course, like everything, they have an AI assistant, and it's called Correro, I guess.
Mm.
I'm here to help you reflect on your connection to the indigenous lands and waters you're on. We'll go slowly, one question at a time. Let's start. First question, what is your relationship to the land and waters of this place? I'm like, oh, okay, well, you're kind of jumping right in.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I actually live in an arboretum, so I'm like, well, I hug trees and stuff, but probably less connected to the water. And so thanks you for sharing that. Um, Next question, how do you plan to create a commitment to this land and these waters?
Mm.
I'm like, this is going slowly, Mr. AI. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, so that's just funny aside. But basic idea is land acknowledgements are usually kind of a rote, scripted thing people read. And there's been, I don't know, probably thousands of hours in committee meetings where people write these things, decide what they're going to say as their land acknowledgement. It is
Yeah.
often on websites. You'll see it. Some people even would put it in their email signature.
Hmm.
And I do still receive it, the intention, because I'm so much more focused on intention, as this honoring. Like, you know what? I'm honoring the people who once called this land home.
Yeah, but only some of them. So it's a non-egalitarian honor. So then that's the intention is to honor some people and not honor others. So to me, that's the clear intention. Let me read the Oak Park one. There's a placard that says
Oh,
land
here you go.
acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Oak Park is situated on the ancestral land of the Potawatomi, also
Potawatomi.
Potawatomi, and also the, or previously known as the Wamiad Kiwin, and then the Miyamiya, then the Oseti Sakowin, the Ki Kapoi, and Peoria. We honor them and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Now, I have to tell you, if I was part of any of those tribes, this would piss me off so bad. I'd be like, oh, you're so welcome. Yes, we graciously stewarded it and handed it to you. That's so wonderful. So that's the weird part, is literally like if you took something and then let's say I stole my neighbor's house and then I put a placard on the outside and it was like, I would like to thank Robert for his stewardship of this home. Mostly that seems like mockery. If I put it up, my intention would very clearly be mockery. What here I don't understand, this is the thing I've tried to explore, but I only had 2, 3 hours to do it. How far back do they go? And when do they stop? And why did they use that window? Like if you're trying to honor the first people, that many people groups lived at the same time in Oak Park? Just Oak Park? Oak Park's not that big. So they all at the same time? That seems really. I'm going to go ahead and challenge that as untrue if it's meant to be these are all the First Nations, because first has a meaning, which means first. So,
Can you break that down?
yeah. Yes. So,
First, meaning
first meaning
not
which
second.
it can't be second, can't be third, can't be fourth, can't be fifth, can't co own as the
And
sixth.
it'd be zeroth.
It could, yeah, there's either zeroth or first. That's literally how numbers work. So they're not likely acknowledging First Nations here. They're acknowledging multiple nations. I don't know why they may have full reason as to why they did these ones and not other ones. But why does it stop there? Like, why wouldn't it? I don't know who else. Let's say, for example, the Polish previously occupied Oak Park and dominated the area for 40 or 50 years. I'm just saying that because there's a big Polish population in the Chicagoland area. I'm not saying this is a historical fact that the Polish occupied and stewarded that land,
But
but they
just
would have, but they also could have stewarded that land. So you've decided to highlight. So to me, land acknowledgements are intended to be um, a mythic narrative creation more than a isn't this cool? However, I agree with you that what goes on the pros list is learning history and talking about the world didn't start when you were born. Like that's huge, hugely important. And to know that if you exist in any nation of any people group on the planet, you're indigenous somewhere, and you were involved in terms of your lineage, involving in the oppression of other groups of people. There is no group of people on the planet who is exempt from that, either one of those. And I think it's important for us to know that, right? Because we have this tendency to write these simplistic narratives of like good guys, bad guys, as though it's an absolute statement, where it's much more like we're all a bunch of anti heroes. And then some people live and some people do better than others in terms of morality. Some people do better than others in terms of survival. You know, we all have, I would hope every single one of those nations had something that was actually distinctly superior in their culture to the nation that displaced them. That's typically how it works. I mean, you look at Rome or whatever, recognize that Greece was far superior to them in terms of language, in terms of philosophy, even in terms of religion. So they literally conquered those people and then were like, Greek is going to be the national, is like as dominant, if not more dominant than Latin across our kingdom. We're going to replace our gods with versions of Greek gods. We consider these people phenomenally wise. They didn't stop colonizing or oppressing them, but they were like, so, but they recognize the superiority in another culture. I think that's a good part of it too, which is to go, hey, different groups of people focus on different things and get certain things right. And the good guys don't always win, and the bad guys don't always win. And the so to me that part of it is really good. But I just distrust because it does seem to be just trying to do another narrative that's as bullshit as the natives were all savages, like Darwin called lesser peoples, less advanced peoples. Because from evolutionary perspective, if you are closer to the origin point genetically, you are literally an inferior human being. This is one of the big problems with evolution as a theory generally, because it literally is a superiority system where if your adaptations survive, you literally produce superior offspring and you don't die. So I reject that personally. I think all humans have inherent moral worth, whether they are recognized by a government or not. So I apply that to Native Americans, even though they were denied the protections of full moral personhood. I reject that, even though Black people were denied this. I reject that, even though the unborn are presently denied this. Um, but that when I read the Oak Park thing, I was like, oh, that kind of to me makes it pretty clear that how even the pro is a con because it unless someone actually goes back and goes takes this as a genuine leap into history, you're going to walk away with a very myopic view of history. That's just a different version of the same crappy one that I think most people in our generation completely rejected, you know, which is like, oh, we come over here and we tried so hard to fix all these savages, but they just wouldn't take fixing. So I'm sorry, but a lot of them did get hurt. You know what I mean? Like that's completely myopic as well. And so you're like, I don't know if swapping out myopic for myopic is helpful, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, I did a actually thought Claude came up with a pretty reasonable list of considerations.
Yeah.
Primary intentions, two of them we more or less covered: recognition of history and educational function. And then yeah,
Yep.
I hear you, like pro and con, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of opening the door to history, but almost never going very deep. I
Yeah.
thankfully in a couple of my groups there was a little more effort to like I think one time we were like, hey, everybody go research one of these like names
Yeah.
we keep throwing around and find out, what you
Who
think,
were these people? Yeah.
and so it was like a little bit,
That's really cool.
but just for me personally, I'm like, for years, it's funny, I sold the only property I've ever owned, I sold in 2018. And at that time, I was like, maybe wouldn't it be interesting if? Oh, so this is proof that I've been thinking about this longer than than I thought. Because I was like, should what if like there was like an indigenous people's tax? Every time you transferred property that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
used to own. And I actually looked into it.
Oh,
A, does
interesting.
it exist? Not here,
Yeah,
but in some places it actually does.
yeah.
And B, where would it go? And that's actually when I started to get ridiculously confused because it was
Oh, yeah, yeah.
oh my God, even if such an idea made any sense, where the hell would it go? To possibly like make up for what was stolen or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it puts a strange obligation on. Now it's interesting because it says we're gonna, if we, again, it's a bit it's a bit European supremacist because it says, well, if we did this, then we have a greater burden of restitution because of our superiority functionally. Or in that case, it's almost claiming a moral superiority by then engaging in continual restitution for winning a fight, essentially, or being the descendants of those who won a fight. And you're like, well, but that, so then ostensibly, if you're going to make that a paradigm, I actually don't think that's a bad paradigm. Then whatever nation you pay, I think it should somehow be collected and go straight to the nation that you're give it to them. But then they have to give it to the nation that they conquered, or else we can't do it.
right.
And then those people have to give it to the people they conquered, and those people have to give it to the people they conquered. I think that's where it gets complicated, where you're just like, or is this just something just we're doing? And I do think there is a unique thing, and we've talked about this a little bit. There does seem to be a unique self-examination being enacted and even required of certain people groups that isn't required of other people groups. So again,
Hmm.
it's a non-egalitarian set of principles. And that's the part that which I think your tax idea points directly towards. So then you're like, okay, like, so then are we doing things symbolically? Am I caught up in the Dances with Wolves like mythos? That we came and we wrecked all these good people. Again, once again, I wasn't there. I don't know how good they were, and it wasn't we because it wasn't me. But they did do harm. There's documented vile harm that was done. Can't dispute that. And then there was vile harm that was done previously as well. We can't dispute that. So yeah, it's just a weird like, and I guess maybe that's my question. It's like, where does that come from? And my theory is because progressivism is a religion that condemns all, well, all in most categories, but then doesn't actually have any restitutionary methodology other than compliance or that's really it, it's then the means of getting out of your guilt does seem to be functionally financial a lot of the time. That you kind of have to buy your way out or like pay. You can literally pay your way out of the hell of being condemned for the oppressor that you are, which again is very similar to what sparked the Protestant Reformation, was the selling of plenary indulgences by the Catholic Church, which were you could basically go buy pieces of paper that could get your loved ones out of limbo and into heaven.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's so the concept here is very similar, where it's like things have been done in the past that are bad, and in this case, by not even by me, I'm actually paying for my literal ancestor who's literally died recently. Then I somehow have to like make up for my anything that my ancestors did, which is already that's a pretty strange concept. And I would actually consider most of the time, wouldn't we reject that as an idea? Like if somebody's dad did something terrible, you'd be like, okay, well, we have to judge the son and the daughter on their own merits. Tony Soprano was like killed a lot of people, and maybe his kids are going to end up terrible too. But we as a society, haven't we already decided that like that's not appropriate? So then how would it be appropriate for groups, larger groups, with no proven, I don't know how long your family was here, but with not even in a proven lineage of connection.
Well, that's especially true because yeah, most of my family was at least spent the last several decades in Kansas, so we were
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this
yeah. Yeah, so
region.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, two other intentions briefly.
Yeah.
One is addressing invisibility, which again, I mean, a lot of these I'm guessing might straddle pro and con because it's like that falls a little bit into the history thing. It's like, okay, at a high level, sure. But I noticed I was just memorizing names and
Yeah,
maybe how to pronounce them. Although I don't know, Potawatomi. That's probably because that's how we say the casino. I don't know if that's right.
sure, sure. At
Um,
least that's how they pronounce it now.
but the last one on this list though is the most intriguing to me, which is relationship building.
Mm,
I I'm sure that happens somewhere.
yeah,
I've heard some whispers of folks
yeah,
actually involved and actually might go to a reservation and actually have real relationships. And I love that. And I've wanted that for a while. I haven't done much about it, but it's like, okay, that's where the rubber could meet the road here. You're
yeah,
actually really like that's what brings us together, like you said in the very beginning, right? Human connection, or no, that was
yeah,
pre-show, but anyway, human
yeah,
connection,
yeah, yeah.
relationships. That's really where it's at.
Absolutely.
I don't, I have literally never personally once been involved in any form of land acknowledgement that enhanced a relationship with a so-called First Nation American Indian person.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. Yeah, I don't know of any either. I do. I assume. I do assume for some it has. Um, and maybe that's lovely just in terms of anything that, like we've talked about, anything that fosters an attempt to make genuine human connection with people you haven't made genuine connection with previously. I don't even want to do it on tribal or racial markers because that seems kind of maybe helpful, maybe not. I don't know. But just doing it at all to anybody, and especially anyone who you might think of as different in any fundamental sense. I think that would be the most helpful thing. So you don't keep thinking of the Powhatan as different or other. And that's even the problem too with putting it on the thing is you're like, these other groups that we are not a part of and we should not pretend we are a part of. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Was anyone? I don't know if anyone was doing, you know what I mean? You're so then it becomes like, does this enhance or reduce othering? And I don't know. Why do you think it gained dominance in progressive areas though specifically? Because I feel like that's really where, as far as I know, it started in the 60s in Australia. It then moved to New Zealand. Australia's history of literally just chucking people on the island who then like absolutely fought with and subjugated the Aboriginal people in much the same ways that colonialism has worked throughout history, inter across seas and just across land masses. Um, and then New Zealand, which has obviously a little bit of a similar issue, not quite as predominant, I think, just based on where they came from, but with the Maori people who were there first. Um, to me, it's a little hard, and I'm just going to say this, but like Maori, and this is maybe my racism, happy to be accused of it. Samoans, Hawaiians, and Maori. Maybe it's just because I watched Moana. They all seem like they're related. They all look weirdly alike for being that far away. But they were ocean people, so to me, I was like, they probably are related. Therefore, that's just my assumption. Go ahead, anyone can prove me wrong. So the Maori one becomes a little more difficult, I think. But nonetheless, that's why they started doing land acknowledgements in New Zealand because of their, I would say, rough treatment of those people who were there first. And then it moved to Canada, especially during the like mid 2000s to 2010s, as they sort of, I think Canada did like a mass reckoning with how they treated people who were still there, who were there then and are still there now. Even so, like with throughout North America, in the United States of America as well, that there functionally should still be treaties in place that haven't weren't honored then and really aren't honored now, which makes this even like a legal, like do you inherit the legal obligations of those who came before you in a nation, which I feel like generally people incline towards yes you do, you're born into it, tough luck, sorry, that debt is yours, to handle. And then from there, from Canada, it began to gain popularity here. But I thought it was very interesting that it gained popularity in progressive schemas, which is why I think it was more narrative based than anything, since critical theory fuels progressivism and critical theory suggests that essentially all language is a power struggle. So then they just started using language and national mythos for their own means. They're like, well, this is how everyone's doing it. So this is how we're doing it. So I think the intention, my guess, very specifically is let's create a new mythos because the old mythos is wrong. Which I don't disagree that the old mythos was also wrong. I just think the new mythos is wrong as well. And we can prove them both wrong. And I think they're both like it's not even that they're simplistic or lack nuance. They lack even like actually they're pretending to be monumentally nuanced when I think they actually just lack basic foundation. Both the we killed all the savages and all we did was kill savages narrative is equally foolish.
I mean, to me, I cringe a little now.
Yeah.
And I was reminded a second ago, and I was like, oh, I've never really, it's never led to a relationship. I am reminded of a group actually here in Oak Park. The Oak Park Library used to have a restorative justice conference, which sadly doesn't happen there anymore. But the last one that happened about a year and a half ago, when they did a land acknowledgement, there was somebody, I can't
Yeah.
I can't even say much useful about who he was or where he came from, but there was apparently somebody from a First Nation involved in it
Yeah.
and speaking to it and even delivering it. And then he was there afterwards. So that's on me. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
my opportunity to actually go talk to this guy and be like, hey, and I don't know, maybe I have his name somewhere. Maybe that's my homework after this episode.
There you go. Yeah. Look through your
Like,
documentation.
hey, you, I want to come talk to you and be a columnist. Uh, but generally, that's probably one of the most genuine attempts I've seen of anybody to be like, because I think I remember them attaching it to some of the very real challenges that exist right now for
Yeah.
folks on
Yeah.
reservations, et cetera. And, did that lead to anything for me? Not really. Did it lead to anything for anybody else? I don't know. Uh, but I generally cringe now when I hear one
Yeah.
because it just feels like hollow, like like just like we're reciting this thing, and that's that happens in any field, right? Like if
Oh,
we
for
just
sure.
start kind of, oh, here's part of the script, and
Yeah.
I don't even know why this is here. Joe put it in 30 years ago, but we still say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like okay, and it maybe one of the worst characteristics is that like if the intention is to quote unquote do something, like
Yeah. Yeah.
acknowledge that there's folks in reservations are having health challenges. Let's just name like one thing I think we can agree on.
Yep.
Uh, it, I don't know of any case where it's led to any meaningful
Yeah.
investigation or shift in any of that. So it maybe one of the worst things we can do is feel like we're doing something and actually, we've checked the
Yeah.
box,
Yes.
right? Uh, and I got this from Claude. One this I think maybe speaks a little to what you're saying, but the format and content sometimes reflect subtler perspectives rather than indigenous ones. So even the idea that like yeah, like I'm
Yeah.
standing up here naming these tribes, the perspective of that is obviously out looking at them rather than
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's externally defining a prior system, which
yeah,
also happens with the similar to the two-spirit thing, which was bringing in like a European-centric gender identity theory and then trying to say it applied to prior indigenous cultures, even though there's no evidence that it did, and there's explicit evidence that it didn't. So it's that same colonial, it's the same instinct. This is way actually fascinating then. It's the same narrative of we know better than the savages.
well,
It's the same thing. We're just doing it all over again. It's just doing it and saying we're opposed to the other people who did it. They did it the wrong way. We're doing the condescension correctly.
right.
Essentially. So then you're like, I don't know. I mean, yes, if you're not literally murdering anyone alongside your thesis, yes, you do win. I mean, in that case, you win the argument. You are doing it in a less harmful way than it was done hundreds of years ago. I mean, I
so
have to you have to you have to grant that point.
we may reasonably roll a lot of this up into virtue signaling. The,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
last con from Claude, though, this is fascinating given this conversation so far.
Yeah.
They can inadvertently reinforce the idea that indigenous peoples are primarily historical rather than contemporary.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Like,
Isn't
yeah,
but isn't that the whole idea that indigeneity is an historical?
it is a historical marker of the past. Yeah. And then that, in many ways, there is no continual version of any of those tribes. Maybe I shouldn't say of any, but of most, based on the scale and distribution of destruction of people and cultures and languages, plus the crappy coping skills for dealing with mass oppression. I don't know if any people group really has figured out super great ways to deal with oppression in general. So, yeah, you've got a problem where are the again this is and it's this strange essentializing of ethnic or cultural identity where you're like, is that it's certainly not progressive, it is regressive. Now, does regressive immediately equal net harm? No. But it is a regressive concept to return to essentializing people based on their their ethnic or cultural grouping. So again, we're Xennials, so we grew up in a society that was like, you know what? Let's stop. We love the whatever. Everyone loves the ML quote, right? Let's judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, not by their national origin, not by their tribal origin, not by their ethnic origin, not by their gender, whatever. Like that was essentially what we were raised in. So I know that is the one that is a very dominant bias I grew up in that I have to constantly fight. But at the very least, I can't just go, well, that's my bias. It can't be true. I do have to bring it up and go, well, okay, well, wait. So I was raised to believe this, and then this is pursuing the opposite course. Even though I was also raised to go at the same time saying, let's stop essentializing these things. Also, the history books lied to you about that people just came in here and tamed a bunch of savages and now life is better for everyone. I mean, you can make a case that life is better for everyone in terms of progressive standards of interconnectivity, of sort of eventually the ending of slavery came about because of Europeans. Labor rights were codified by Europeans, women's suffrage codified by Europeans. I mean, we have infant mortality has improved. You know what I mean? We have all the metrics to say that it's gotten better. I don't, I don't find it convincing of moral correctness personally because I'm not a utilitarian ethics person.
But we don't necessarily have metrics from, I don't know, 500 years ago for how people were, I don't know, infant mortality, for instance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think infant mortality goes back like a couple hundred years at best. Um, so we And then this is also the issue is, and listen, I'm a word guy and I'm a text guy. This is a thing that doesn't get acknowledged as much. We are so text based as a world now, globally, that interacting with quote unquote indigenous cultures that had no writing
Yeah.
system captured makes all of this very confusing and very difficult. And then it's way past the game of telephone of what most histories even were captured in, whatever, right? So when I'm a Christian and the Gospels are continually criticized that they were written decades later after Christ's crucifixion, decades by eyewitnesses. But I was like, we don't really have written stuff for thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands of years until people wrote it down. Now, can oral traditions be phenomenally accurate? Of course they can, especially in cultures that value oral transmission. They would be as adroit in memorization as we would be in committing things to writing. But it does make it very difficult in a written material dominant world to even assess all of this. It makes it so. I just want to acknowledge that, and I've been pursuing other lines of thinking that keep running into the same intersection. So I'm just like, it does make things really difficult. So then people, I feel like, feel prompted to make up myths because we don't have the information. Like we don't have
Well,
the info, about whether the modern tribe is anything like the ancient tribe. They could be completely different. Oh wait, sorry, I had one quick question. I apologize. I just talked for so long, but I do have a question about the library. Why did that conference move from that library? You were saying it doesn't get held there anymore. It just get too big, or
well, that one in particular, that exact conference doesn't exist anymore because the guy who was running it kind of got ousted from that library, which is a whole other story that we should.
Is it another story, or is it related to what we're talking about? Like, is it about indigenous and colonization claims elsewhere in the world?
Not, no,
No, no. Okay.
no. Uh, as they said in the Neverending Story, which I annoy my daughter with all the time, that is a story for another day. But
Okay, gotcha. I didn't know if it was related to. I know there was a lot of tensions at the library about Israel Palestine stuff, which is obviously about
it sort of coincided with that in a weird way. There's
yeah,
many
yeah,
layers, and it's funky, and I
yeah,
feel
yeah,
like I've gotten pieces of the
yeah, yeah.
story.
I was just
So
hoping that would have been such. It would have been so funny.
where I misquoted my favorite book, and that is another story that shall be told another day. That's how it goes.
No,
That's
I want
that's
it
how
now.
the
I
Neverending
want it.
Story. Every time he didn't feel like finishing
Yes.
a, a thread, he's like, "Well, we'll just go over here now."
Yeah, yeah.
Which
That's enough
maybe
of
that's
that.
relevant actually to what we're talking about.
Yeah, it kind of is. Well, yeah, no, I knew there was some controversy at the library, so I thought it would have been hilarious if the land acknowledgement people had to leave
Oh
because if
no,
you
yeah,
yeah yeah because
I don't think it had anything.
if you were in modern Israel, like if you're in Gaza and you had a progressive meeting, you would have to acknowledge this is the ancestral land of the Hebrews within the same paradigm we do land acknowledgements here in Oak Park. Because Oak Park wouldn't probably include people from the 700s or 900s on. That seems unlikely because
Right.
that gets too close to like European. So then that would be fascinating if basically it was like an issue. And so this is also fascinating too, right? So let's say the Palestinians, even let's pretend the Palestinians are indigenous, even though they're not. Definitionally, people keep calling them, but since if the thing is First Nation, then it's certainly not the Palestinians. They're I don't even know. They're the 17th, 18th, 21st people that we know historically lived in that area. So it's certainly not them. They wouldn't be on the land acknowledgement board in Oak Park. But let's imagine there they were. They were living there. They were living there. The descendants of colonizers, right? They came in. They're Arabs, so they came in with the Ottoman conquering, with Islamic conquering of the area, and then they are the children of, and now considered the marginalized. If the Palestinians formed a nation, got together, and eventually conquered Israel, and then in that kind of like treated Israel pretty crappily in return, right? Just treated them terrible. Like, how would we feel about that? Like, wouldn't, from a progressive point of view, isn't that kind of at least perhaps an overreach of exactly what progressives want? Meaning they then would want the same thing for colonists here in the US, like in the US. So the colonists rising from marginalization to conquer the people who are doing better than them, to enact a more egalitarian, interconnected system. Because then the protections became national, not tribal, right? So the protection for citizens is a much broader area of people who receive equal protection. It still sucks because it leaves a bunch of people out, but it doesn't suck as much as tribal, which is a much smaller unit of full humanness. You know what I mean? So we've run historical simulations and we have them now. And so I think that's one of the things about land acknowledgements that made, I think land acknowledgements made the advocacy in Gaza hard. I think that's one of the reasons they started falling off of favor and I
Mhm.
haven't seen them as much. Is because you're like, well, we can't keep talking about that principle because it's violated over here. So we've got to be like, and the same thing with the pronouns, right? I think the pronouns slipped because it just became out of fashion, but it's the contradiction of like, well, wait, these are biologically associated pronouns throughout all of human history. We all know that. No one's pretending that wasn't the way they were. But then we're also sort of compelling use of these in a bunch of scenarios now in civil law and in multiple states and in a bunch of HRs. And so now that it's an imposition, it feels like we're violating if there's systemic oppression of views, then we can't. And so I feel like a lot of it is like having to quietly fold up tables and like and like slide out of the room and be like, because it proves its own undoing, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, there was sort of a funny example of that last night. I was in an online circle that I hadn't been to in a while, focused. I would say mostly this is focused on racial justice, although I give it
Mm.
credit last night for going into something more universally healing, which was just
Oh,
talking
cool.
about like being being wrong and feeling wrong, and when did that show up in our lives, and what does it cause
Yeah,
in our bodies? And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's
that is good.
it is good. I was like a little, I'm kind of just done like whining about, racism and all of that. Interestingly, I observe that when
Yeah.
we were in peak pronoun, like say 5 years ago,
Yeah, yeah.
the the black groups I was in and the racial justice groups I was in, unless there was a hardcore intersection with
Yeah.
the Q plus, like the those groups rarely did the pronoun thing. They rarely,
Yeah.
named them, put them on Zoom, asked people to say them, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was a funny throwback last night because the
Yeah.
leader, and she wasn't forceful about it. She was just like, and if you want to name your pronoun,
Yeah,
pronoun,
your protons.
and I was like, huh, I don't want to name my pronoun.
Oh,
So a lot of
yeah.
people did,
Yeah.
and then I was the one who didn't. So I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's so funny. I love to do it. But I obviously don't use like whatever
Yeah.
he's and she's. I love to do pronouns like wrestler or procrastinator is my
Well, that's
classic.
what a while ago I switched. If I'm leading something, to say meaningful identities,
Yeah.
because that's intriguing. Because then it's like
Yes.
father, gardener. I'm like, okay, I'm learning about you. What's
Yes. Yeah.
like sort of present in your life.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I like that too because of course one of my um big issues is the redefinition by progressives of identity to mean subjective claim, whereas identity is formally meant the fact of being. So if someone says they're a gardener, we can prove whether they're a gardener or not. You know what I mean? If someone says they're a father and they don't have any children, you'd be like, oh, okay, so that's not true. So I like meaningful identities. But then the problem is like what, I mean, in any group, especially in a progressive group, or if you're in a mixed progressive group, then this is the funny thing is like everything is a powder keg now. If language is as relative as progressives are proposing, this is why communication is starting to become destabilized aggressively. Like people don't even know, like we're not even seeing the same things when we look at the same thing. We're not, and this has always existed to a micro units, but now it's happening in macro, and it's pretty fascinating.
Well, that loops me back to something you said that I wanted to touch on, which is that a lot of human cultures
Yeah,
historically were oral
yeah,
traditions and didn't have written language, didn't write things down. So, you know, for we still have some access through the elders, and even that's been, I'm sure, diluted generation to generation. Uh, but they're dying. So I
yeah.
have really enjoyed wherever you fall on this whole subject. I have really enjoyed reading books from Indigenous authors, and particularly ones that sort of have like a foot in both worlds, and the other world
Mm,
being, I don't know, the Western world, modern world, our world, whatever you want to say.
yeah,
Three come to mind: hospicing modernity, sand talk, and braiding sweetgrass. Hospicing modernity, she introduces this term wording the world. So to your
mm,
point, like that's
yeah.
the way she names that we've gotten obsessed with words and labeling things.
Yeah. An oral culture would be even more obsessed with words because we can write definitions down to make things clear. Whereas an oral tradition, you could not have any relativistic terminology or you'd be unable to communicate with anybody.
Hmm. Sand talk, he is of what we now call Australia. And
Yeah.
that's really fascinating because he talks about it's like symbolism, like it'll be a, I don't know, like a boomerang, but with these glyphs on it. And
Yeah.
so anyway, wherever you fall on this, I think there's a lot of wisdom, just human wisdom, knowledge, bias, which of course is part of human wisdom,
Yeah.
and all the things in those books.
Oh,
I'm ready to call in the vote. What do you think?
oh, okay. Okay. Well, it's funny. You just said wisdom. Maybe this is a whole separate conversation,
Oh, geez, yeah.
but like, because this made me think of indigenous ways of knowing or indigenous wisdom.
Which is thrown around a lot, absolutely.
Right. Which is again, because indigenous means is applies to every people group on the face of the planet, means the collected wisdom of human beings. But I feel like this is another case where people use the term wrong. Just like I feel like Oak Park is kind of applying the indigenous concept incorrectly, provably. And then likewise, like indigenous people are all people. And so to somehow set indigenous wisdom or ways of knowing, which I think the same paradigm does, as somehow separate from like Western ways of knowing. What are you talking about? Like those are indigenous people too, and they brought their summaries to bear, and they are so in some ways. Again, I was like this whole concept of like limiting indigeneity seems very European supremacist to me, because then it says like that's again that's like the other, just the other ways of knowing. But I think this is what I think, since again it was oral dominant, we don't know, and so people are able to project whatever they think it means on that term, which means it's like again it's like indigenous or land acknowledgements. You're like it's this nebulous, it's not, it doesn't lack nuance, it lacks clarity. You're like, I don't even really know what you're, again, this is like meaningful identity. Like if you said that to me, I'm like, okay, well that's something that's meaningful to me that I can also is a fact of what I am, not a subjective claim. So, ooh, even if I said Christian, like it's very important to be that I'm a Christian. You're like, ooh, well, I mean, is that an identity? Sort of. Yes, I guess it is, because it can be proven or disproven. And I
Yeah,
and I'm claiming it as a fact, but then someone can dispute it as a fact because facts require the ability to dispute them in order for them to be facts.
yeah.
But
I might
anyways,
have said indigenous authors, but I hope I said human wisdom intentionally.
you did, yeah, you said human wisdom,
And
but it's
now
just
like a
yeah,
new definition is coming. Like perhaps the way I think about indigeneity in this way is like
yeah, that word is tricky.
tribes that are at risk of going extinct.
Mm.
That's like a I don't know, parallel way to think about it for me.
That's interesting. Anyway, I think it's
And
interconnected.
bodies of wisdom that are at risk of like evaporating,
Yeah, yeah. What like well, like what are there any though that are bodies of wisdom? Are there any bodies of wisdom that are going extinct? Meaning, like, are there particular wisdom principles not available anywhere else that are
Yeah,
go?
like in Braiding Sweetgrass, she just talks about how the Potawatomi language probably won't survive. And so I
Yeah,
connect, I guess implicitly, I just connect like a group of people with a specific language and way of being as having their own
yeah, yeah. But
perspective,
yeah,
and then I'm connecting that perspective to wisdom. Does it exist in some way somewhere else? Perhaps, but it will
probably.
never be in that way. So it's like a
Yeah,
species going extinct in the rainforest
yeah, yeah,
all the
yeah,
fucking time.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is why we chose written language, like because then it's oral tradition is specifically designed to die with its people. Like it's not, in some ways, it's highly insular by intention. It's not meant to be understood by anyone but the tribe. It's not meant to, in some ways, might not even apply to anyone but the tribe,
Right.
because it's designed to die with the last person who speaks this language, which is really poetic. And in some ways, I actually think here's some wisdom in it. Any oral tradition like that gratefully and fully acknowledges the end that death provides. It's not near as obsessed as perhaps we are in the modern world with preserving life continually, and somehow, oh my gosh, how obsessed we are in the modern world of like, well, if AI gets good enough, can it preserve our consciousness so then I won't really die, and then I'll just be contained in ones and zeros, but it'll still be me, I think. Will it still be me? Whereas just like, no, all things, if you live in, if listen, this happened to every indigenous, including the English, uh, things die seasonally. You can't, people die, things die seasonally. There is a season for all things, and
Well,
all
the
things.
colonizer in me wants to, you know,
Package it and preserve it.
package that and put it in the archives of a library somewhere, and so someone
Yeah,
can find it 1,000 years from now.
yeah, we're hoarders, man. I'm saying this to you and me more than I am in terms of the European tradition. But we are. We build museums from stuff all around the world. We're like, look at this. We're obsessed with wisdom. We're one of the most wisdom and like information obsessed people groups in the world, the modern human. So how did we? Is this? Did we land on what the question is? Does it mean are they helpful at all, or does it mean they're net helpful?
We're
More
going
help.
with our land acknowledgements more helpful than not.
Okay, Queet. Queet is sweet and cool at the same time. Um, I'm gonna actually have to probably even more firmly. I'm just gonna put my thumb down. They are not a net. They are more harmful than helpful. But big ups to all my First Nation homies. I got nothing but love for you.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs down on this one. I do not see the evidence for all the reasons we explored today, namely the lack of that leading to genuine relationships.
Yeah, which is something we both love. Thank you for having a genuine relationship with me, Andy.
And thank you. Love you.
Love you.